Alright you guys, this is your last Q&A for the year. Like I always say, if I don't get you on this one, I'll get you on the next one. You guys know the routine. So let's get straight to it. Lalo wants to know, what's the expectation when establishing a regiment, money, street rules, etc. and how is that audited when power and money is involved? I mean, the overall expectation is to become productive and to generate money. At the end of the day, that's what's important and that's what the organization is expecting from you. Prior to getting released back out there to the streets, you're indoctrinated on the street activities. Everything you need to know in order to go out there and establish a fully functioning NF street regiment. The formula is broken up into 3 key components: manpower and leadership, goals and objectives, and finally, communication and finances. Whenever you make a commitment to function out on the streets, you spend the last 6 months of your time studying street activities. These areas of indoctrination include a broad range of topics that are geared towards everything from establishing your COC, your chain of command, the implementation of policies, rules, and procedures, manufacturing and distribution of narcotics, taxation and extortion, investment strategies, financial ventures, communication and reporting procedures, both criminal and legal business investments, organizational contributions that are determined on a sliding scale, and how to utilize street gangs to combat street gang warfare. The topics branch off and expand into different areas, but it changes alternating from a leadership and a member perspective. When you're getting ready to get out and break ground in a new area and you've been appointed to oversee that regiment, the schooling is different from someone who's set to get out and plug into a regiment that's already established. It's analogous to someone on an apprentice level opposed to someone on a management level. The apprentice gets the basics, but someone who's appointed to be part of the managerial level gets training geared from a leadership perspective. Other expectations include the obvious. You're expected to lead the regiment in a way that's consistent with how you've been taught, and in a way that won't jeopardize or put the lives or the best interests of the manpower in a detrimental fashion. Because as a regimental commander, you're not only responsible for the state of affairs with regards to your manpower, but you're also responsible for their lives and the type of situations that you ultimately decide to put them in. As far as how the books are audited, this varies from C to C, but trust me, when it comes to money, how it's generated, how it's allocated, and how it's contributed, there's usually a lot of involvement. You're expected to report how many members you have working under you, who's contributing, how much they're contributing, and what type of criminal activities the regiment's involved in. The books are tightly monitored and controlled, and like I said, the amount of money that's expected to be contributed is calculated on a sliding scale. 25% of all money derived from illegal activities goes back to the organizational bank, and the regimental bank is usually capped off at $10,000. Anything above that is supposed to be forwarded to the organizational bank. Bay wants to know, Stockton really has no NF rep. That's crazy. There is literally thousands of Norteños in that city. How are they not taking advantage of that? It's mind-boggling. That's a lot of manpower not to be put to use. I agree. It absolutely makes no sense to let that city sit idle and stagnant for as long as it has. I wish I could provide some clarity and articulate an answer for you that would make some sense, but I'm even stumped on this one. As I had mentioned in the profile I recently did on Mad Dog, I can tell you firsthand that I know for a fact that Mad Dog had extensive plans for Stockton and that he was looking forward to putting Stockton back on the map. But what I don't understand is how come there hasn't been any other C's from Stockton that have shared that same drive. With all due respect to Mad Dog, the world doesn't stop with him, and it shouldn't. Other C's out there have to be willing to carry that torch. Stockton's a big area. I haven't been in the mix for a long time, but I find it hard to believe that there isn't any C's who've been recruited from the Stockton area, or that there isn't anyone out there. Back in the late 90s into the early millennium, the reason why there wasn't a regiment operating in Stockton really was because there wasn't no one out there in that area. And we just lacked having anyone in that area that had the initiative or drive to break ground out there. Not only that, but the way leadership has continuously mapped out Northern California when it's come to areas that the O is focused on, this has legitimately impacted Stockton and that whole area. What I mean by that is this. Most of the C's that were appointed to oversee the street regiments and act as padrinos, father in Spanish, or synonymous to a leader overseeing the regiment from the Bay, always vied for areas like Salinas, San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, Santa Rosa, Sacramento, Tulare County, etc., etc. Whether it was because they either had contacts established in those areas or because they were considered to be more lucrative areas, Stockton's just never been one of those areas that's generated that same kind of interest. And that's not a slight towards Stockton, because I personally know that there's a lot of money out there and that it has a lot of potential. As some of you might know, when it comes to NF leadership, there hasn't really been anyone from the Stockton area that's been at the top of the O other than Mad Dog in a while. So in an indirect way, this has played a role in this as well. Stockton's been one of those areas that's either been neglected or avoided because it's always been looked at as Mad Dogs, and that's how it's been for a while now. So PNG Media wants to know, what are your thoughts about it being said that Joe Morgan was able to walk the yard alone? I think it's propaganda propagated by someone who's a Joe Morgan sympathizer. I mean, come on, man. Joe Morgan was a treacherous dude, but because of who he was and what he represented, he was a walking target. He couldn't just walk the yard by himself back in those days like it was nobody's business. The same could be said for Robert Babo Sosa. He wouldn't have been able to just walk a yard without security either. They would have turned him into a human pincushion. So Abraham NA wants to know, what is the status of the Mexican nationals being embraced into the NF? I am sure you're aware how deep the Paisas are in federal prison and the alliance with La M. Do you think the NF has ever embraced an alliance with the Paisas? I'm not sure what you meant when you asked about the status of Mexican nationals being embraced into the NF. Keep in mind, I record these questions exactly how you guys send them in. So just be sure to double check them, because one word can throw the whole question off. But I believe you're asking whether or not the NF embraces the Mexican nationals or the Paisas. Look, the NF philosophy, the ideology is founded on protecting, defending, bettering, supporting, and fighting for the raza. This includes the Paisas. They're supposed to be our people. They share the same bloodlines. They have always been considered to be one of our purest reflections of the raza. Back when I was schooled and when I just started coming to prison, we embraced the Paisas and made sure that we educated them to dispel the negative propaganda and the myths that were being generated by our adversaries. They were being systematically misinformed and told that we opposed them, that one of our goals or purposes was to oppress them and that we didn't like or respect them. But this was a tactic. It was being done to avert any possibility of the Paisas coalescing themselves with the NF. So I remember being told to take advantage of every opportunity to dispel this propaganda and to reach out and educate the Paisas whenever we got the chance. In fact, back then, Sureños weren't even technically considered to be our enemies. They were looked at as raza as well. The only reason why they became adversaries is because they aligned themselves with the M and became part of that collective. But from what we were being educated back then, I clearly remember being told that if we ever got the opportunity to even dispel some of these same myths that were being propagated to the Sureños, to cultivate and enlighten them as well. So our philosophy back then was all about bettering the relations we had with the Paisas, the raza as a whole, and to let them know that we embrace them as our people, making sure that they're not subjugated, abused, or subjected to the same type of inflictions that some of the founding members of the NF were subjected to themselves. The same type of abuse and inflictions that caused them to band together and form the Nuestra Familia in the first place. I know that things have somewhat changed over the years and that some of the propaganda they've been fed has impacted our relations with them. In fact, we've even allowed some of that same propaganda to skew our perspectives by buying into the notion that paisas were Sureño sympathizers, that they didn't fuck with norteños, and that they had a strong alliance with them. When I was still active, I even bought into some of this propaganda myself, and it definitely affected the way in which I looked at paisas. I'm not sure how those relations are right now and what kind of line the NF is pushing in regards to how the paisas are embraced, but that's how it was when I was active. As far as the paisas being deep in federal prison and them having a standing alliance with the M, yes, I'm aware of how deep the paisa car is in the federal prison system. From what I understand, they have one of the biggest cars in the federal prison system. The MA doesn't need this alliance. They're a powerful organization within themselves. But on the other hand, this is a smart move insofar as politics goes. I believe I've already addressed the last part of your question with regard to whether the NF has ever had an alliance or if I think it'll ever have an alliance with the paisas. Like I said, in the past, this used to be one of our objectives, to strengthen and better our relations with the paisas. I just don't know the current state of affairs right now. There's a lot of different scenarios that come into play with regard to this, but I definitely think the NF would be open to future alliances with the paisas, as it has never considered them to be the opposition. So JR wants to know, what was the most savage AB you ever came across? Was there ever a fight where your opponent gave you the business? Can you tell us about it? And you guys really want to see me get whooped, huh? Damn, man. Listen, I ran across a few ABs who I would have considered to be dangerous dudes. I just finished doing a profile on one of them, the late Billy Ray Hamilton. The crimes that sent him to death row clearly show what type of guy Billy Ray was. But aside from that, and aside from the murder he committed while he was right there on death row, I also got the opportunity to meet Billy Ray on a personal level. I'm just gonna say this. I've been around enough dudes in the game long enough to know when I run across somebody who's really about that life. And Billy Ray was definitely one of them. 3 other ABs I've been around that I would have considered to be as real threats are Rick Turflinger, John Stinson, and Danny Troxel. As was the case with Billy Ray, these guys' reputations not only preceded them, but I also interacted with them on a personal level, so I know what type of dudes these guys were. All 4 of these guys were not only part of the Aryan Brotherhood's leadership, but they were also real active in the politics and were known for putting in a lot of work. As far as the second part of your question regarding me getting into it with an opponent and getting the business, you guys are too much, man. You really want to see me get my little wagon fixed, huh? I can tell you where I took an L when I got jumped and was packed out, but I'll just tell you about one incident that took place in San Bruno back in 1996 when I ended up with 2 broken knuckles, a broken wrist, a tooth knocked out, 2 others smacked loose, a busted lip, pretty decent shiner, ooh-wee knots all over my head, and the whole side of my face looking like somebody took a cheese grater to it. Look, I'll just give you the short version of what happened. So I was fresh out the bay. I had just paroled the day before. In fact, I still had my dress outs on. That morning, a homeboy named Ray Machado from Excelsior Park, a guy I grew up with, picked me up in the city and wanted to take me to a bar that his family owned in San Bruno. They either owned it or they worked at that bar. One of the two. It was just myself, Ray, and this girl. Since I had just stepped out, the homie wanted to take me to this bar. Like I said, his family either owned it or they worked there. So he told me that it was a cool spot. We could drink all day, that drinks were on the house, that we could just shoot pool and kick it. So we pull up to this bar, and Ray had obviously told the owner a lot about me because this dude was all hyped up over the fact that I had just paroled and that I had just come from the SHU in this infamous prison, Pelican Bay. Come on, man. I'm sure a lot of you guys that have done time in Pelican Bay know exactly what I'm talking about. After paroling from up there, you run across that one individual who's infatuated with the fact that you just came from up there and he's showing you all kinds of praise for having done time up there. Anyways, when I drink, I try to stay away from the hard liquor because things usually end up going all bad. I either end up fighting, I end up in jail, or I just end up doing something that I regret later. So I try to stick with just drinking beer. And those were my intentions that day. But this guy that owned the bar kept telling the bartender to keep bringing us rounds so that we could toast and celebrate my homecoming. I mean, these fools were on one. First, it was a toast to me coming home. Then it was a toast to all the homies that were still up there. Then it was another toast for the hood. By the time we were done, I had about 6 shots of top shelf kamikaze in me, and I was lit, man. But I was feeling myself. So at one point, I spun off to go shoot some pool while Ray and his old lady went out to the back deck behind the bar that had a little barbecue area and some picnic tables. Anyway, he went out there with this girl. So after about 20 minutes, I'm still in the bar shooting pool, trying to have a good time, when Ray's old lady comes running in from the back door and tells me that Ray's outside fighting and needs my help. I had no idea none of this was happening. I don't know who he's getting into it with, what it's about, or anything, but I run out there and I'm still holding the pool stick. So when I get out there, Ray's squared up with this big ass Samoan cat, and he's getting his ass handed to him. There's 3 other dudes that are out there standing to the side, and it didn't take long for me to figure out that they were with this other guy that Ray was fighting. So all 4 of these dudes, they're pretty good sized dudes. Ray was just an average sized dude. I was healthy back then, but I wasn't feeling too good about this 4-on-2, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. I got nothing but love for the homeboy Ray, but when it comes to his squabbles game, he couldn't fight for shit. So I'm watching him fight this guy, and I'm trying to encourage him to get up in there and get his money. But the dude had hands and kept smacking the shit out of him. Picture this. So I'm standing there watching these guys go at it. As they're going at it, they're going in circles. And every time Ray makes a full circle, we make eye contact. Ray don't say nothing. Every time he comes around, we lock eyes. But he don't have to say nothing. He had these little puppy dog eyes, where he had this little puppy dog look in his eyes that was saying, "Help me, bro. This dude's whooping my ass." So I could have snaked the dude and slapped the shit out of him with the pool stick, because I was still holding it. But instead, I just leaned it up against the wall and tried playing Captain Sabo. That's exactly what I did. So I told Ray, "Watch out, bro. I got this, man." Because dude was getting his ass whooped, man. So Ray steps back. I square up with the dude, and we start going at it. Bing, bop, boop, bop, bing, boop, bop. We're throwing haymakers, man. We're both big ass dudes. I don't think this cat even got hit one time when him and Ray were fighting. But now me and this cat are going at it. So out of my peripheral, I'm still watching these other dudes, because I know this is their boy, and I know that this could go bad at any minute. And I'm expecting it to. Then it does, but not the way I expected it to. I look over and I see Ray start swinging at these other dudes, and now it's an all-out brawl. Like I said, man, I got a lot of love and respect for Ray, and I know his little brother, Gus. But I remember thinking to myself, man, you couldn't even fucking hold your own in a heads up with this dude, but now you want to start swinging at these other dudes, man. This fucking guy, man. So anyways, I go to pull one of my signature moves on this cat. We're fighting, and I try to pick him up and body slam the dude. So when I pick him up, one of his boys hit me from the back, which caused my weight to shift, and it throws me off balance. So when I'm coming down with all this weight I was holding, my face grazed the side of the picnic table. That's why I said it literally looked like someone took a cheese grater to the side of my face. My face was fucked up. I don't know where Ray was at, but all I know is I was going at it with 3 of these cats now. The original one and 2 of the other cats that were posted up, and Ray wasn't nowhere to be seen. Later on, he told me that he was fighting inside the bar with the 4th cat, but I didn't see him. And like I told him, it didn't matter. He shouldn't have left. He shouldn't have left me out there with these other 3 cats by myself. But anyway, by this time, the owner comes running out and starts yelling for all of us to leave, that he already called the cops. So, I was so mad, man, at that point, man. My face is fucking leaking. I was so mad that I didn't even give a fuck about going to jail. I just wanted my runbacks, man. Half my face was carved off. I was leaking. I was busted up pretty good. So these cats were trying to leave, but I kept going at them. I wasn't trying to let them leave. at that point, if I would have just stopped right there, I would have left with the full grill and most of my ego. But that's not what happened. The owner was still out there trying to get all of us to stop and leave. And at one point, he got in between me and the first guy that I started fighting. This cat was behind the owner. He was using him like a shield. So since I was fighting all three of these cats, I picked up the pool stick as an equalizer, and I went after these cats. But now, like I said, the owner was trying to stop me, and he started telling me to leave. This is where I lost my grill, man. Fucked up. And this is why I don't drink hard liquor, because it definitely had an effect on me. So as I'm telling the owner, man, get the fuck out the way, you're gonna get smacked too. I'm trying to get at this cat behind him. But the fool that was standing behind him, he fucking reached over his shoulder and cracked me straight in the fucking mouth, man. At the time, I didn't know it, but when he cracked me, he knocked out my fucking tooth, man. And knocked 2 others loose. I'd find that shit out later. I didn't even know it, but that motherfucker knocked my grill out, man. So anyway, long story short, I ended up smacking the owner of the bar with the pool stick because the motherfucker wouldn't move. And as soon as I hit him, the fool that was hiding behind him he bolted through the bar and ran out the front door. I ran after him, but that motherfucker hit the burners. He was gone, man. So as I was walking back toward the bar, that's when I fucking realized, man, I can taste blood in my fucking tongue, man. I'm feeling there's a big ass hole, and I'm like, you motherfucker, man, this motherfucker knocked my grill out. So I walk up to a car and I pull the mirror and I look at the side mirror on the door, and I'm looking, I'm like, yeah, man, this motherfucker knocked my shit out, man. So anyway, we jump in Ray's car, and right when we're pulling out of the bar's parking lot, San Bruno PD, they're just getting there, man. Before they can make a U-turn, we drive a block down, and I'm already hanging out the car. I'm like, let me out. I jump out and I brake. I try to fucking take off. But anyway, I ended up getting arrested like 20 minutes later. Them fools saturated the area and flushed me out. So 2 of the other cats that I got into with, they apparently got arrested too. But the cops ended up giving us all a break and they let us all go. That was a rough day, man. I lost part of my grill, and that would later cost me 2 racks to fix. My wrist was broken. I broke 2 of my knuckles. I took an L, but you know what? After catching the break and getting cut loose, man, it made it all okay, man. So that's my story right there, man, about me taking the L, since you guys want to see me get beat up so goddamn bad. So anyway, Peter McGregor wants to know, for clarification, as it is public knowledge, the feds are up on the criminal activities of the top 3 prison organizations. Knowing the feds have evolved with their investigation and technology methods, do you think the leaderships will follow suit to counteract so that they continue to operate under the radar? It just seems if you don't change up, history will keep repeating itself. Absolutely. Look, these criminal organizations are constantly evolving, reorganizing, revising, transforming, and progressively developing in an effort to adapt and stay ahead, or at least in step with technology and law enforcement methods. As law enforcement continues to get better and develops new investigative methods for cracking down on these criminal organizations, the criminal organizations themselves are also getting better and are constantly counteracting new methods to thwart law enforcement. Like you said, you can't sit stagnant and continue to operate the same way you've been operating. You have to advance. You have to change up your patterns, change up the way you do business, change up your modus operandi, your MO. If you don't change and evolve, you become predictable. What I will say is this. I personally don't believe that some of these criminal organizations, the NF in particular, doesn't place enough emphasis on some of their own missteps and indiscretions. The things that should have become their learning experiences. In the past, leadership hasn't capitalized off these things like they should have. I mean, this is exactly why history continues to repeat itself, because a lot of these lessons are disregarded and overlooked. Indictments, for example, have always provided an inside glimpse at some of law enforcement's investigative tactics, their legal strategies, and just an overall blueprint at how they approach these investigations, what they look for, what they rely on, etc., etc. But here's what happens. The indictments hit, out come the transcripts that reveal the cooperators and what evidence was relied on. It outlines the major mistakes and the cognitive levels of error that were made. These things are talked about, and then the same mistakes are made again and again. The series of indictments that took place in San Jose between 2004 and 2008 that I was personally involved in are a classic example of what I'm talking about. Every case that succeeded mine should have and could have learned from the mistakes we made. They might have even been able to avoid getting caught up themselves, but they didn't. They made the same mistakes and walked into the same traps. It's just how it goes, man. So Johnny Wheeler wants to know, what happens when out-of-staters come in? Which state is the worst to come from in the eyes of CDC? Out-of-staters are processed and ran through the system just like everyone else. I'm not sure CDC has a preference, a like or a dislike either way. Even when gang affiliations come into play, I don't think CDC cares much either way. I mean, because if you really think about it, what kind of an impact could an out-of-state inmate, gang member or not, have on CDC one way or the other? And when it comes to the inmates themselves, what kind of impact could it have on them? In the big scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. So M. Mill wants to know, if you are not locked up, what other ways is there to join the NF? They have local enlistment offices in every major metropolitan city. I'm kidding, brother. The only other way to link up or get recruited is on the streets through one of the functioning regiments. I mean, there's some extreme scenarios that could come into play, but these types of scenarios are not common. For example, someone out there on the streets you know has a channel, an NF contact, that they're either writing or have phone contact with, and you're recruited through sponsorship. The guy making the call would act as your sponsor or the one who recommends you, and then the contact would have the authorization to sanction your recruitment. Other than an uncommon scenario like that, you either have to know someone active out there on the streets or be linked in somehow. Otherwise, the only other place besides prison that you might have action at being recruited is in the local county jail. So Skipto Pena wants to know, if you come across a weapon on the yard or a housing unit that belongs to an opposition, what do you do? Can you get in some kind of trouble for taking it or disposing it, or even using it? That's a good question. This depends on a couple different scenarios that come into play here. And before I get into this, let me just make it clear that I'm answering this question from the NF's perspective, not just in general terms. I know this kind of goes without saying, but I'm just making this clear as the protocol and the policies are definitely different from group to group. So if you're talking about out on the main line or a general population yard, policies with regards to this can vary and change depending on who's running that yard and who's the overall authority. In some situations, digging up a piece that belongs to a different group faction could, and most likely will always be taken as a form of disrespect, especially if it was purposely searched for and targeted. But worrying about that part of it isn't a priority, at least not right now. The weapon is considered to be a threat or an extension of a threat. Some OAs will be inclined to confiscate it, dispose of it, and make sure that the opposition or whatever group faction it belongs to doesn't get it back. Of course, anytime a weapon gets intercepted, it's definitely going to be taken as a form of disrespect. It's just like someone coming into your house taking one of your guns. It's part of your personal security. But that's if they find out about it. It's on each group out there to secure its own weaponry, to make sure that it secures its weapons in areas on the yard that make them less prone to being found. So I guess it would depend on whether or not anyone knew about that weapon being intercepted and what type of effect it could create on the yard. Other things could come into play as well. If you knew for a fact that this weapon belonged to the opposition and there was tension on the yard, and you found a weapon but decided not to confiscate it, would you want to be the one who's then responsible for that weapon being used to take out a fellow brother? There's a lot of different scenarios that come into play when it involves weapons or finding weapons outside of your collective. But there's always policies and clear protocols set so that you know how to deal with situations like this. Now, Aztec or shoes are different. These yards are community yards. In other words, other groups might use the same yard on alternating days, so there's always a possibility of finding a weapon that was left out there from another group. In this situation, the weapon is always confiscated. It's never left behind. Part of our yard security procedures always entails the first brothers out there on the yard to conduct a full perimeter check to look for any weapons or contraband that might have been left behind. The yard must be secured prior to the remaining household members coming out, period. This is mandatory. Also, it is against household policy for any weapons to be hidden out there by anyone that's on our yard, in or allied, period. This would be considered to be a breach in security. Me personally, it's always been my own policy to never leave a pedazo behind if I find one. If I find it, I'm taking it, period. If it creates some type of issue, then I'll deal with that later. But I'm not leaving a weapon behind. So Everlasting Base wants to know, what was your biggest inspiration to write a book about your life? To be honest with you, my biggest and my only inspiration for writing my book was just so that I could get the truth out there. That's all it was about for me. It wasn't about any type of monetary gain. It wasn't about self-embellishment or self-glorification. It was just about letting people know why I made the choices that I did. I'm not going to get into all the details, as most of you already know my story and what happened. But I just hope that people will read that book and see things for what they really were. Unfortunately, when it comes to that lifestyle and some of the choices we make, people are sometimes going to define you, your character, and your past based on one event you were involved in. I clearly understand this, but those that have been around me since all this has happened have come to know firsthand that this is simply not true when it's come to me and the choices I've made since all this happened. So Edgar Gallegos wants to know, I would like to learn the Aztec language. How do you guys learn the Aztec language? From fellow inmates or books? Would you know any books or recommend any books that would be helpful? Yeah, this was done as part of our formal indoctrination when we used to hold klesha. Here's an example. So up in Pelican Bay in the SHU, there's always one C, one NR member, or one N who's appointed to hold the position of a maestro, a teacher in Spanish. It's usually always a C, since these are the most seasoned brothers within the collective. However, it just depends based on who's there. The maestro's responsibility is to conduct different areas of schooling for everyone in that pod that's part of the household. Everything from the 14 bonds, the NR format, the NF constitution, contingencies and hypothetical scenarios, weaponry, Gray's anatomy, mainline training, etc., etc. There's other areas such as covert communications, which includes learning the Aztec language, Nahua, sign language, writing, creating and deciphering codes, ghost and mini writing, concealment, and a slew of other topics. If the maestro's teaching Nahua, he's usually fluent in speaking it and knows how to walk you through it. It's done just like a traditional classroom, brother. Same concept. Same type of teacher-student concept. Here's 3 books that I recommend for you to get since you want to learn. These books help you with the suffixes and the prefixes, the pronunciations, and they just simplify everything for you. I read all 3 of them. Nahua is a very complex language, but once you learn the prefixes and the suffixes, it's all downhill from there. Grab these to start you off. 1, An Introduction to Classic Nahua by Mitchell Laney. 2, Learn Nahua, Language of the Aztec and Modern Nahuas. And 3, How to Speak Nahua for Beginners. Good luck, and I hope this helps, brother. So Rich Silla 1 wants to know, who are the top 10 most influential NF members of all time, dead or alive? This is just my opinion, man. I'm going to give you 15 of them, though. Here's my list of most influential NF members, and not necessarily in this order. I'm going to go ahead and drop 15 for you. And like I said, they're not in order of seniority. Michael Castillo, Robert Brown Bob Viramontes, Cornelio Corny Tristan, James Tibbs Murato, Vincent Big Chente Arroyo, Andrew Mad Dog Cervantes, Robert Babo Sosa, Joe Death Row Joe Gonzalez, Gerald Cuete Rubalcaba, Joseph Pinky Hernandez, Hector Copas Gallegos, Tex Marin Hernandez, David DC Cervantes, Sheldon Skeet Villanueva, and Matthew Mateo Rocha. So Carmillo Escobar wants to know, what's the meaning behind the Mongolian haircut? Whose idea was it? What individuals can rock it? I'm not sure who the first northerner was that introduced the idea of wearing Mongolian haircuts, but I can answer the rest of your question insofar as what the meaning is behind wearing it and who is allowed to rock it. The whole concept or meaning behind the Mongolian haircut is derived from the Kiat Mongol, who wore the haircut to identify themselves as Mongolian warriors. Different styles had different meanings. Many of these hairstyles were used by other Altaic nations too. So in simple terms, the Mongolian style haircut symbolizes the style of a warrior. There is no status or anything like that connected to them. Anyone who basically wants to sport one can sport one under their own free volition. So Raymond Colazo wants to know, do you think if you were active, would you be a general today? Man, if you would have asked me this before Operation Black Widow and while most of the old leadership was still in the state system, I would have gave you a definitive no. There was a lot of qualified C's that were still in the fold back then, and there were a lot of C's who had a lot more seniority than me. But that's an interesting question as you ask it today. I really don't even want to give an answer to this one way or the other, because if I say the wrong thing, I'm gonna get crucified and I'll be taking shots from all directions. And even in just making that statement, I'm not inferring that I'd say yes I would be, far from it. All I'm saying is that this opens the door for all kinds of negative rhetoric and the haters to start yapping. I'm not a power hungry dude, man. I never was. Those that knew me when I was active can attest to this. I've never been the type of dude who has an inflated ego where you guys hear me always talking about general this, general that. I don't do that, and it's just not my style. I talk about my time when I was a leader because that's what I was, and that's just the truth. Like me or not, that's just the truth. How far I would have got and how many more rungs up that ladder I would have climbed will obviously forever be a mystery. Nobody will ever know now, but I will say this. It's a very interesting question based on where I was when I fell and who some of these guys are that are now being placed in some of these positions. It's mind-boggling. Dudes that we never even would have considered to be recruited as hermanos are who the inner council and the general council is composed of now. The pickings are slim. At one point, it looked like they didn't even have enough candidates to fill the general positions. To be honest with you guys, when the state hijacked the leadership position and it came time for them to appoint these positions, the whole process was fraught with problems. These positions are earned over the course of time. You're voted in based on performance, based on your ability to maintain other positions, and just your overall ability to fulfill a position like that. But it just seems like these guys put a bunch of names in a hat and had these guys play luck of the draw. I'm not taking shots at anyone, and I'm not saying this to slander those who have been appointed, but seriously, no one can refute the fact that these positions were practically handpicked overnight. This will be evident as this last indictment, Quiet Storm, plays out in the courts. Why do you think these guys got indicted this fast? It took 5 years for Operation Black Widow to commence. The investigation in Quiet Storm was run through so quickly because there was a lot of sloppy shit done by inexperienced leadership. This left them prone to indictment, and that's why it didn't take long for the feds to move in. So the Martin 9400 wants to know, well, the Martin 9400 always has multiple questions. So let me just read off the questions. I've heard NF members weren't obligated to function in a regiment once they parole. Is this true? And if so, would someone who has money-making potential be allowed to walk away? 2. I've heard stories where the AB did hits for the MA. Did the BGF ever do anything similar for the NF? Have the NF and BGF ever fought side by side in a riot against the MA or AB? Or was the alliance mostly limited to providing weapon stock, intel, and commissary items during lockdowns? 3. Is it known how the alliance between the NF and the BGF came to be? Who proposed the idea? And was it easy to sell the idea to NF members from communities where Raza and blacks had little or no interaction with each other or were in direct conflict with one another? And 4. While on mainline, what was your level of overall opinion on the maturity level of YA babies, especially the ones sentenced to life? Anyway, like I said right here, the Martin 9400, you always got good questions, brother. That's a fact. But you always have multiple questions, so that's how I'm going to answer this. You asked whether there was some truth to NF members that are now being told that they no longer have to function on the streets. That's a big no, my boy. There is absolutely no truth to this at all. Think about it. The way things are now, this is practically the only real viable way an NF member can function productively for the O. The streets and the revenue generated from the streets is the number one priority right now. Nothing supersedes this. It's all about making money and being productive on the streets. There's no real underlying purpose behind the walls other than to survive. But the streets is the primary focus, and this is where everybody is needed, literally, down to every single member. They're still hurting for manpower right now, so a policy like this would be counterproductive. As far as the NF-Bgf Alliance and whether or not the BGF ever assisted the NF by carrying out hits for the NF the same way the AB did for the MA, this alliance was a lot stronger in the 70s, 80s, and into the early 90s. And a lot of the old school BGF members not only fought side by side with the NF and its following, but they also carried out hits the same way the MA and the ABs did for each other. I know this because I was personally involved in some of those wars and fought side by side with some of these guys. In fact, the alliance was so strong back in those days that some of the older BGF members were actually schooled and laced up by some of the carnales. And just so no one gets the wrong idea, when I say schooling, I'm not talking about all their formal schooling that they get as BGF members. I'm just talking about some of the basic areas of schooling correlating around the alliance and some other areas pertaining to the NF, the NR, the Norteños, the history, etc., etc. Other examples of them assisting us were similar to what happened in San Quentin in the early 90s with regard to the integrated yard. Our opposition was being sent out to that yard, and at that time we didn't have anyone out there. The BGF were assigned to the same yard we were on, NF BGF Northern Mexican Yard, but the BGF still maintained influence over the northern blacks on the integrated yard, and they used this influence to engage every last one of our targets that were out there. The next part of your question was in regards to how the alliance developed between the NF and BGF. It actually started simultaneously both behind the walls and on the streets. During the proliferation of the Cesar Chavez movement, the Black Panther Revolution was also in full swing, and as a strong showing of support, the Black Panthers marched together with the Cesar Chavez activists and their supporters. Back in those days, this movement was monumental amongst and within the familia, and these bonds transcended into the prison system. This was also very effective in some of the actual communities themselves, where, as you mentioned, the relations and interactions between blacks and the raza was strained and almost non-existent. The ABs and the MA already had established a symbiotic working arrangement. This kind of also paved the way for the NF-BGF Alliance to solidify, and by then, it just seemed to make a lot of sense. As far as the last part of your question regarding YA babies and their maturity level, occasionally we had a few problems with some of the youngsters who tried bringing the YA mentality with them. But after a good tongue lashing and after threatening them with a good spanking, they got back on track, and for the most part, they never really caused any problems. It seemed like the 80s and parts of the early 90s was considered to be the biggest part of the whole YA era. And this is when a lot of the YA babies were coming into the prison system. It probably had a lot to do with some of the major changes and closures that a lot of the youth authorities were undergoing at that time. But it just seemed like the YA hype was at its peak during the 90s. As far as lifers, surprisingly, YA babies that came to prison as lifers were always well behaved and carried themselves well. But I think this has something more to do with the fact that you get humbled when you're either in a situation where you've been given a life sentence or you've been faced with a life sentence. The threat of it's one thing, but when you've actually been in that situation and your life has hung in the balance, it humbles you and it forces you to grow up fast. So Raul Velasquez wants to know, what was the worst pen you were in when you were locked up? As far as what? Different prisons for different reasons. But overall, I'd have to say that Corcoran was probably the worst prison. Not just because of the level of violence, but just because of the way they had the program set up there. It's a depressing prison, man. And I just hated everything about it. The way it was set up, how they ran the yard, the shower program, the COs, the design of the cells, where your cellie is literally laid out right across from you, etc., etc. And I'm referring to how it was after the gladiator fights were long over and were a thing of the past. So Machete wants to know, have you seen any of the other prison gangs' rules and regulations for their groups? Yeah, Machete, I've pretty much seen them all. The only thing there really is to say about it is this. For as sophisticated as I had assumed that some of these other prison organizations were, there was nothing impressive about their written policies, rules, regulations, or procedures. By some opinions, the NF and the NF's following might be considered a smaller group, but by far they are the most organized, the most structured, and the most sophisticated organization of them all. And I'm not saying that simply because I was a former member of the NF. I'm saying that from an unbiased perspective and from having looked at all the other organizations' written policies myself. There's just a higher level of emphasis that was obviously placed on drafting up the organizational writings, the Constitution, all the older outdated subdivisions, the category system, etc., etc. Even the organizational leadership structure, the hierarchy is established under a paramilitary structure that is more organized than any other group out there. Don't get me wrong, there's flashes of sophistication and organizational structure in all these groups. The BGF's revolutionary writings, the Aryan Brotherhood's drafting of the commission, the MS Reglas and some of their policies when it comes to recruitment and their street operations. But the NF is meticulous and anal when it comes to its internal writings and the organizing of its manpower. So Sess wants to know, since all tis-ish went down with the feds in state, the homies that got done dirty, like old boy from Salas, forget his name, but feds wouldn't let him go back, right back with organization. I assume you're referring to Mateo Rocha from Salinas, right? It all depends. It's all going to be dependent on everything that's happened from the time they hit him up until whenever his situation gets investigated. Everything's going to be taken into account and investigated, i.e., why they hit him, whether or not he talked to the administration or anyone following the incident, where he was housed at after the incident, whether or not he went to an S&Y, etc., etc. All these things are going to factor in when it's all investigated. Contrary to what some people may think, this stuff still matters. Despite the fact that he got done dirty, he's still expected to maintain his integrity and he's still accountable for his actions. I anticipate that there will be quite a few investigations that will take place aside from just the one concerning Mateo from Salinas, because from what I heard, this self-appointed state leadership hit quite a few C's and R members and N's that refused to be part of their frivolous state-led agenda. So Elmo's Chopper wants to know thoughts on people who put out NF content, speaking on things as if they had first-hand experience and they weren't ever even a member. Oh boy. This is my feelings on that. And there's several parts of this that I'm going to address point by point. If you have a YouTube channel and you identify yourself as a content provider, then anything and everything is open game. You can write or talk about anything and everything you want, as the only perimeters you're obligated to follow are the ones that YouTube has set itself. These channels are so diverse and convoluted that you can't even place them in a particular genre. That's how a lot of these channels operate. They just speak and write about anything and everything under the sun. Current affairs, world politics, media hype, celebrity gossip, etc., etc. And that's okay. But here's where the waters get muddy, and here's where I lose respect. I don't respect it when other channels place themselves in a certain genre based on their claims, how they identify themselves, and based on the things they claim to stand for. Example, if you profess to be all about spreading a positive message, that you're in it solely for the purpose of bettering your people, and you talk about gangs because you're trying to help and prevent the younger generation from falling victim to some of the same mistakes you made, then don't just let those words come out of your mouth. Live up to them and really be about dropping that message. You can't play both sides and perpetuate some of the same things you claim to be against. I don't respect someone that still tries to represent their neighborhood and who are walking the fence when that's not the image or message that they've tried to project. As far as different YouTubers trying to speak about NF business or drop NF content when they've never actually been a member themselves, I'm gonna put it to you like this. You don't necessarily have to be an NF member to drop content about the NF or to even speak on it. I'd be a hypocrite if I said anything different, as I've spoken on the MA, the BGF, the ABs, the Crips, and the Bloods. That's not the problem. Everybody's acquired knowledge about different gangs just from being in the game. But again, that's not the issue I have a problem with. The issue I have a problem with is how some of these guys drop profile after profile about different NF members and give off the false impression that they know this individual on a personal level, as if they're in the know or as if they personally interacted with some of these guys. So many of you have sent me DMs about this. You know who you are, former and current NF members who have actually been around these guys like myself and who have expressed the same annoyance and aspiration as I felt. These guys all tell me how they just listen to so much of the misinformation that's put out there, and they describe how they'll be sitting in front of their computer monitor saying no, no, and no. That didn't happen. No, that never happened. This never happened. Where do these people get their information from? Trust me, I can't even watch some of these videos. They're so off base and are filled with so much fabrication that sometimes the individual that's being talked about has been transformed into something else, and the description doesn't even come anywhere close. So for me, it's not the issue about having to be a former member of the NF in order to talk about them that gets me. It's about giving off false impressions, going into someone's characteristics, what they did, how they were, how they operated within the organization, and what they were about when they've never even been around some of these C's that gets me. How can you speak on these guys, describe their characteristics, and talk about it as if you were in the cell next door to these guys and you've never even been to the SHU program? What it all comes down to is what I've said before in the past. To some people, the truth isn't important. It's just about creating content and burning up airtime so that they can get a paycheck at the end of the month. The reason I don't expose these charlatans and some of these individuals who put out this fraudulent content is because then it's going to get spun back around on me that I'm hating, that I'm being negative, that I'm trying to take away their shine, blah, blah, blah. That's hilarious, man, and it couldn't be any further from the truth. But here's how I look at it too. If people are going to be that naive, and if they're really going to believe some of the things they hear, then that's on them. It's perplexing and mind-boggling to see how easily some people are misled and how willing they are to believe some of the things that are out there. They have all the information, all the true facts are already out there. All they have to do is a little bit of research themselves, and the truth will begin to reveal itself. How long have I been saying this now, man? Trust me, I'd absolutely love nothing more than to get into a one-on-one personal conversation with some of these guys on YouTube and have an opportunity to take the gloves off and to ask some of the hard questions myself. To get them on the ropes and to just pose some direct questions about some of the things that have been said. I promise you, it wouldn't take more than 10 questions to expose the frauds. This is my former team that we're talking about. What do I know? I only functioned within this organization for a couple decades. Why wouldn't I know what I'm talking about? Anyways, I know I've said it a couple times already, but to just reiterate on your question one more time, I'm going to close this question up by emphasizing on it one more time. You can use your platform to talk about whatever it is you want. Whatever you want to talk about. That's your prerogative. But when you do it in a way that gives off false impressions, or when you speak on it in a way that suggests or implies it's coming from first-hand experience, I can't and don't respect it. I hope that answers your question, brother. So Jake Nelson wants to know, if you knew you were going to war on the yard and you had to pick 5 C's to go to war with you, who would it be? Where were you when Colors came out? And what were your thoughts? When Colors first came out, I was in San Quentin doing a parole violation, but I ended up getting out and watching it when I came home. To be honest with you, Colors is a classic, and it's just one of them movies that's always going to be talked about. But I'll be honest with you, it just didn't grab me like that. And to me, it was too watered down and too Hollywood. Some of the other movies like Menace to Society or Training Day that were in the same genre were just better movies to me. Okay, so the next part of your question is to give you 5 C's that I picked to go into battle with me. Here's 5 who are, again, not in order by priority. Cornelio Corny Tristan from Woodland, Sheldon Skip Villanueva from San Jose, Anthony Chino Morales from Hanford, Bismarck Nicoya Ocampo from San Fran, and Roque Boxer Martinez from Salinas. Those are my 5 warriors right there. So the 6 of us, we're about to tear shit up now. So Machete wants to know, do outlaw motorcycle gang members have to pick a car to ride with in the joint? Any guards that intimidated you or put a beat down on you? No, Machete, they don't have to do anything, but they usually do. I don't remember anyone who ran alone or who identified as being from one of the bigger motorcycle gangs having their own cars. Honestly, from the ones that I personally have seen coming to the joint, they were either Mongols or Hells Angels, and they either ran with the whites or the Sureños. The Mongols have a lot of raza in their club, and most of them have identified with being a Sureño. The Hells Angels almost always run with the whites, and if it was a Mongol who was white, he would usually run with the whites as well. So Mr. Goyo wants to know, what was the best regiment you ran in what county? That's a good question, Goyo, but I'm going to have to answer it like this. As time went on, I definitely became better at operating street regiments over the years, and over time I also acquired more seasoning. When I was the regimental commander in San Francisco, I was just learning, and I wouldn't even equate what I had accomplished out there as a true regiment. I mean, it lacked in so many areas that all I was basically doing was functioning. The second time I was appointed to be the regimental commander for San Francisco a year or 2 later, I knew what I was doing, and this is when I really began to apply my training and all the things I was being taught as a young NF member. Later on, when I became the regimental commander for Ukiah, Santa Rosa, or Sonoma County, I was getting better and I was learning more of the in-depth concepts and training I was acquiring, but it was also nothing compared to what I'd accomplished later. For the next few years, I would continue bouncing around to different places in the Bay Area and was assisting some of the regiments that had dispersed and that had basically broken up after getting hit with indictments. Leadership tasked me with bringing these regiments back together, and I basically had to find all the stragglers and get them back up on track and plug back in. Now almost 10 years into it, I was paroled to Monterey County and became the regimental commander for the Salinas Regiment. This was probably one of the best regiments, if not the best regiment that I had functioned in. It was either out of San Jose that would come next or Salinas, and it was for different reasons. There was a lot of true carnalismo in Salinas, and I genuinely liked working with some of the brothers out there. I forged strong bonds with some of these guys, And these bonds even withstood the familia and the test of time. In other words, I would remain tapped in with some of these guys, and these ties would never be broken, even after my ties with the NF were broken, and even after I fell in bad standings. The brothers out there in Salinas already had that area on lock as well. It was a cakewalk establishing that area because it was technically already established. All I really had to do was beat up a couple people, make some quick examples, and then just make my rounds in lieu of the other C's who had previously functioned out there before me. Everything was already set up. Not only that, but because of the NF's long line of history in Salinas, and the gente out there are already somewhat accustomed to working with the NF, this just made everything a lot easier. San Jose would unfortunately be the end of the line. This would be the last regiment that I would oversee, and this is where I would end up getting caught up. I also had a lot of good experiences in San Jose. The homeboys out there have already adapted to that same type of culture like Salinas, and again, this just made things a lot easier. The one thing I will say about functioning in the San Jose Regiment is that this was by far the most advanced, the most sophisticated, and the most established of regiments that I had ever overseen. Part of this was because I had a chance to put all my training in effect, everything I had learned from all my hands-on experience over the years, and this helped me operate on a level that by far exceeded any of the other regiments I had overseen in the past. When I was working in the Salinas Regiment, I worked hand in hand with Smokey. We also had some solid brothers like Shorte working with us, and we had our hands in a lot of shit. Crystal, Black, Yeska, Ecstasy. And I was networking with some of the homeboys in Frisco who were able to supply me with enough crack to flood Chinatown with. But again, it didn't even come close to what I was able to accomplish in San Jose. At the peak, when everything was at its highest point and I had everything dialed in, collectively, we were pushing anywhere from 30 to 40 pounds of meth a month. I had an elaborate counterfeiting operation going. We were conducting robberies and extortions. We started moving large amounts of Yeska, and I had invested in a legitimate limousine company that I used as a legitimate front to wash the books, money laundering, and to clean the dirty money. But with all the good came the bad. All this shit came to an end on June 11, 2004, when someone told on me and sent San Jose SWAT, B&E, Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement, and SCC-SCT, Santa Clara County Specialized Enforcement Team, to kick my door in and raid 7 other houses that were in all conjunction to this same investigation. It was all bad, man. So Familia 916 Kings wants to know, would you make a movie about your life? Most definitely. If everything was in order and it could be produced the way I would want it produced, then I would absolutely put one out. Why not? I already dropped the book. So Speed Kills wants to know, was Brown Bob hit for the tattoo cover-up and the anti-gang talk, or the D facility dilemma? I've gone over this numerous times already, so I'm just going to give you the short version. The rumors about Brown Bob being hit for covering up the NF insignia on his back and for his participation in MAG, Mothers Against Gangs, were just smoke screens thrown out there in an effort to divert attention from the true underlying reasons. His decision to cover up the tattoo on his back and all the rhetoric about Chuco taking an offense to it was hogwash. This stuff could have been written for the National Enquirer. It was a bunch of false rumors to distract attention away from the real reason. Brown Bob was killed because he was charged with treason and because it was assumed that he was in cahoots with the wayward tyrant he created in Big Smiley. That's why he was hit. Like I said in the D facility dilemma spill I just dropped, his biggest blunder was not giving clarity to his position when it came to Big Smiley's aspirations and this whole self-serving idea of him inventing a position for himself that he coined or titled the boss of all bosses. This other rumor about him speaking at MAG conferences was just another rumor that was spun to again divert the real reason. I honestly can't confirm whether he spoke at one of these conferences or not. I heard it was a bogus accusation, but again, I can't speak truth either for it or against it. So Raider Alvey wants to know, who in the NF could give you a run for your money in the hands department? And here you guys go again. You guys are crazy, man. You really want to see me get my little wagon handed to me, huh? I don't even know how to answer that. I'm sure there's probably a lot who could give me a run for my money. They call me the Terminator, but I'm not the toughest guy out there, man. There's always going to be someone bigger, someone tougher, and someone badder. That's just the way it goes. I wish I could give you a more definitive answer, but I guess we'll never know. So PNG Media News wants to know, is that true for today that when Sureños from Northern Cali go to prison, they're classified as Norteños? That's a big no, PNG. These guys are classified as Sureños, as CDC is very aware of the fact that they are Southsiders who are homegrown in Northern California but identify themselves as upstate Sureños. The only way this would happen is if one of these upstaters failed to identify himself as a Sureño. Because he's coming from a Northern California jail, there's room for confusion, but these guys always identify themselves. Not identifying yourself and your affiliation is a suicide mission. It would be just the same as if a Norteño entered the LA County jail and failed to identify himself as a Northerner. He would more or less already know what would be waiting for him once he got to the back and they put him in a Sureño module. Game over. It's the same way for an upstate Sureño entering the reception center. They ask these guys right there, and trust me, they always tell them. I hope you guys have enjoyed this Q&A. Realistically, we're trying to put out a Q&A at least once a week, so continue submitting your questions and it'll eventually make one. In closing, we're trying to get as much content out as we can before the new year. I'm working on several profiles and other content, so be looking out for it. As we get ready to kick off 2022, myself and Sandman will probably try to drop one more live either Wednesday or Thursday, so look for an announcement to let you guys know when. Finally, I want to emphatically extend both mine and Sandman's appreciation for helping us reach our milestone. We hit 20,000 subs earlier in the week, and it's a huge testament to us showing all the hard work we put in and all the support you guys have been showing us. Thank you again, and it's a humbling accomplishment.